The gavel crashes down like a verdict of doom. Miss Caldwell, your kind always thinks the rules don't apply to them. Judge Sterling Blackwood sneers from his elevated throne, his words dripping with 400 years of institutional racism. He's looking down at Bryn Caldwell like she's something he stepped in. But in my courtroom, there's only one law, mine. This 67-year-old white man in black robes thinks he's untouchable. He has no idea the welfare mother sitting before him has been building his downfall for 6 months. The trap is about to spring, and his entire world is about to crumble. According to court transcript 2024-CV-1847, line 247, what happens next will destroy him forever. You will lose your daughter today, and you'll thank me for it. The lock clicks twice, then silence. The alarm pierces the darkness at 5:30 a.m. Bryn Caldwell's hand moves to silence it with military precision. No fumbling, no snoozing. One swift motion. Her feet hit the cold hardwood floor of the cramped apartment, and she's already mentally cataloging the day ahead. Coffee first. Always coffee first. In the kitchen, she measures grounds with the exactness of a chemist. 2 tablespoons. Level. No more. The ritual steadies her nerves, centers her focus. The precision seems almost ritualistic, like someone following procedures learned elsewhere, in situations where exactness mattered more than convenience. As the coffee brews, she checks her phone. 3 missed calls from Diana Pierce, her court-appointed attorney. Too early for good news. She doesn't call back. Not yet. Instead, she opens a small spiral notebook and reviews notes written in precise handwriting. Times, dates, observations. The kind of documentation that suggests systematic thinking rather than random worry. 8-year-old Kira shuffles into the kitchen, her school uniform wrinkled from sleep. Is today the day, Mama? Bryn's chest tightens, but her voice remains steady. Today's just another day, baby girl. Eat your cereal. But they both know it's a lie. Today, Judge Sterling Blackwood will decide whether Kira stays with her mother or goes to live with Gordon and Patricia Whitmore, the wealthy white couple claiming grandmother rights to a child they've never truly wanted to know. The morning routine unfolds with practiced efficiency. Bryn arranges Kira's backpack with methodical care, checking homework folders and permission slips with the attention to detail of someone for whom preparation matters. She observes everything: the placement of items, the sequence of tasks, the timing that allows for contingencies. For a clinic receptionist, her organizational habits seem unusually systematic. The bus ride downtown takes 43 minutes. Bryn sits in the back watching cataloging. She notes the security cameras at each intersection, their angles and potential blind spots. The badge numbers of transit police become automatic observations. The way passengers glance at her and make assumptions. Single mother, probably struggling, certainly not someone who matters. Her fellow passengers see what they expect. A young black woman in modest clothing carrying a worn purse and manila folder. They don't notice how she observes them in return, how her eyes track movement patterns, how she mentally maps routes and contingencies. The behavioral patterns suggest training from somewhere else, some other context where situational awareness was survival. At Lakewood County Family Court, the metal detector beeps twice. Officer Linda Hayes, the security guard, makes Bryn empty her purse completely while waving through 3 white lawyers with bulging briefcases. Standard procedure, Hayes mutters, not making eye contact. Bryn complies without protest, but Hayes notices something odd about her demeanor. The way she stands during the search, feet slightly apart, hands visible, breathing controlled, resembles someone familiar with security protocols, like she's been through more serious screenings in more serious places. Her belongings reveal the careful preparation of someone who understands bureaucracy. Work ID, bus pass, insurance cards, and a manila folder thick with documents. But Hayes catches a glimpse of something else. Edges of additional papers, forms that don't quite match the typical custody case materials. The courthouse waiting area smells of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Families cluster in hushed conversations, their faces wearing institutional dread. Bryn claims a seat in the back corner, positioning herself where she can observe all entrances. The choice appears natural, but it's tactical. Trained behavior that suggests experience with situations where escape routes matter. Her folder opens to reveal legal-sized papers arranged in perfect chronological order. Character references, employment records, school transcripts showing Kira's honor roll status. Each document copied in triplicate, hole-punched, and labeled with color-coded tabs. The organization exceeds what most people facing custody battles manage, suggesting familiarity with evidence presentation that goes beyond desperation. Diana Pierce arrives 20 minutes late, her public defender briefcase bulging with a dozen other cases. She's young, overworked, and fighting a system designed to churn through the powerless. Miss Caldwell, remember what we discussed. Minimal responses. Don't engage with their provocations. Judge Blackwood runs a tight courtroom. Tight. Bryn has spent weeks researching Blackwood's history. 93% conviction rate in criminal court before moving to family law. 6 ethics complaints filed, all dismissed. Pattern of harsher sentences for defendants of color that somehow never triggers official review. She knows more about his background than most attorneys who appear before him. Pierce notices something unusual in Bryn's preparation. The research is thorough, too thorough. Most clients bring basic information scraped together from internet searches. Bryn has compiled statistical analyses of Blackwood's rulings, procedural precedents, and case law citations that even experienced attorneys might not know. For a clinic receptionist, she demonstrates remarkable familiarity with legal methodology. Diana, Bryn says quietly, I've prepared responses to likely objections based on Blackwood's pattern of sustaining challenges to character evidence under Rule 404. Rule 404. Federal Rules of Evidence Governing Character Testimony. Pierce stares at her client in surprise. Most PROSA defendants don't know federal rules exist, much less cite them correctly. The courtroom doors open with institutional weight. Gordon and Patricia Whitmore glide in like they own the building. Maybe they do. Gordon's $1,000 suit hangs perfectly on his silver-haired frame. Patricia's designer dress costs more than Bryn's monthly rent. Their attorney, Jack Morrison, follows behind, a shark in silk ties who specializes in custody cases for the ultra-wealthy. The Whitmore's claim is legally thin but financially powerful. Patricia is the sister of Kira's deceased father, Ryan. When Ryan died in a motorcycle accident 2 years ago, the Whitmores suddenly discovered their deep concern for a niece they'd previously ignored. Their petition cites Bryn's unstable employment, inadequate housing, and lack of proper male influence, code words targeting working-class black single mothers. Court clerk Brenda Sutton approaches Bryn's table with visible reluctance. Your filing is incomplete, she announces loudly enough for nearby attorneys to hear. You're missing proper witness attestation forms. Bryn opens her folder and produces the exact forms, properly notarized and filed 3 days prior. They were submitted with the original motion as required by Local Rule 3.1.4. The specificity stops everyone. Local Rule 3.1.4 governs witness attestation in family court proceedings. Sutton's face flushes as she realizes she's been caught in either incompetence or deliberate obstruction. She snatches the papers without apology and retreats to her desk. The system thought they could crush a defenseless single mother. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who'd been building their case from the inside. What happens next will leave you speechless. Keep watching to see how this corrupt judge's world crumbles. Bailiff Officer Dale Krause emerges from the judge's chambers, his hand resting conspicuously on his sidearm. He's peaked in high school football energy channeled into intimidating defendants who can't fight back. His eyes sweep the courtroom with the territorial aggression of someone protecting his domain. Keep your voice down, he tells Bryn, though she hasn't spoken above a whisper. This isn't your neighborhood. The racial implication hangs like smoke. Diana Pierce starts to object, but Bryn places a gentle hand on her attorney's arm. Not yet, not here. But Pierce notices how Bryn's reaction is controlled, measured. Most clients would be angry or upset. Bryn seems to be filing information away for later use. Patricia Whitmore leans toward Morrison, their conversation deliberately audible. A proper environment requires stability, Jack. Structure. Values that some people simply can't provide. Her eyes flick toward Bryn with practiced disdain. The courtroom fills with observers. Mrs. Dorothy Palmer, an elderly black woman, has attended every hearing. She's seen institutional bias destroy families for 7 decades. But something about Bryn strikes her as different. The younger woman's composure under pressure reminds Palmer of lawyers, advocates, people with hidden power who choose to appear powerless until the strategic moment arrives. Judge Sterling Blackwood's entrance changes the atmospheric pressure. He sweeps through the door like an Old Testament prophet, black robes billowing. At 6 feet 4 inches, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, he commands attention through physical presence designed to intimidate. His bench sits elevated 4 feet above the courtroom floor, a throne built to demonstrate superiority. All rise for the Honorable Judge Sterling Blackwood, Krause announces with true believer reverence. Blackwood settles into his chair with absolute power satisfaction. His gaze sweeps the courtroom, lingering on Bryn with undisguised contempt. He opens the case file with theatrical deliberation, his expression souring with each page. This court will now hear the matter of Whitmore versus Caldwell regarding custody of the minor child, Kira Caldwell. His voice carries decades of bench authority and casual cruelty of someone who's never been challenged. Diana Pierce rises to present their opening statement, but Blackwood raises a dismissive hand. "I've read your filings, counselor. Spare the court your melodrama." The message crystallizes. This hearing is theater. The decision has already been made. Morrison stands with never lost an expected case confidence. "Your Honor, my clients seek emergency custody of their late brother-in-law's child. Miss Caldwell, while undoubtedly well-intentioned, lacks resources and stability to provide educational and social opportunities this child deserves." Well-intentioned carries backhanded compliment sting. It suggests good intentions coupled with inadequate capability, polite condescension that transforms love into character weakness. My clients have established substantial trust funds for Kira's education and future welfare. They offer opportunities that Miss Caldwell, through no fault of her own, simply cannot provide. Morrison's argument seduces through reasonableness. Who could oppose giving a child every possible advantage? Who would condemn exceptional talent to limitation because of misplaced family sentiment? Bryn requests permission to present character witnesses, but her terminology emerges precisely. "Your Honor, I'd like to call character witnesses to establish stability and appropriateness of my home environment for Kira's continued development." The phrasing stops everyone. Character witnesses, stability and appropriateness, continued development, sophisticated legal vocabulary that most pro se defendants wouldn't know to use. Blackwood's eyebrows raise almost imperceptibly. "Character witnesses?" He studies Bryn with predator-sensing unexpected resistance interest. "Where exactly did you acquire such familiarity with legal terminology, Miss Caldwell?" The question hangs like a trap. Answer too knowledgeably and raise suspicion. Answer too simply and appear evasive. Bryn threads the needle with practiced precision. "Research, Your Honor. When your child's future is at stake, you learn what you need to learn." Technically true, but revealing nothing about actual background depth. Gallery observers exchange glances. Mrs. Palmer leans forward, studying Bryn more intently. Something doesn't match the narrative being presented. Morrison objects to character witnesses as irrelevant. "Your Honor, the question isn't whether people like Miss Caldwell, but whether she can provide educational and social advantages necessary for optimal child development." Bryn responds with procedural knowledge that surprises everyone. Says, "Your Honor, Federal Rule of Evidence 608 allows character evidence when character is an essential element of the case. In custody proceedings, parental fitness constitutes precisely such an essential element." Perfect citation. Rule 608 correctly applied. Federal rules of evidence aren't taught in high school. They're learned in law school or through extensive professional legal experience. Diana Pierce stares at her client in amazement. Weeks of preparation never revealed this level of legal sophistication. Pierce begins wondering what else she doesn't know about the woman she's representing. Blackwood's expression darkens. He's accustomed to intimidating pro se defendants who stumble through proceedings with confused questions. Bryn's competence threatens his absolute control sense. "Miss Caldwell, this court will determine relevant evidence. You will restrict yourself to answering questions, not citing federal regulations." Sharp rebuke reveals underlying concern. Blackwood doesn't want Bryn demonstrating knowledge that undermines inadequacy narrative. His reaction confirms what observers are beginning to suspect. Bryn isn't what she appears to be. Morrison produces financial documentation thick enough to choke a horse. "Your Honor, Miss Caldwell works as a receptionist at a community health clinic. While honest work, it provides neither income nor professional environment that would benefit a child of Kira's potential. Honest work, but not respectable work. Not work that qualifies someone for parenthood in wealth-worshipping society. Furthermore, my clients have established educational trust funds, full tuition to Pemberton Academy, followed by any Ivy League university of her choosing. Opportunities that Miss Caldwell simply cannot match. Pemberton Academy carries old money weight, established families, generational connections, doors that open throughout life, places where judges and politicians' children learn to perpetuate systems benefiting them. In today's world, protecting your family means having the right technology. Secure Home Pro offers comprehensive security monitoring with AI-powered threat detection, legal-grade recording capabilities, and instant alert systems. Whether you're dealing with custody disputes, workplace harassment, or neighborhood safety concerns, having documented evidence is crucial. Secure Home Pro's cloud-based system ensures your recordings are legally admissible and tamper-proof. Protect what matters most with technology you can trust. Bryn rises to address the court, demonstrating courtroom protocol understanding that seems automatic. She stands at precisely the right moment, addresses the bench with appropriate deference, maintains eye contact suggesting confidence without challenge, behaviors requiring extensive courtroom experience. Your Honor, I respectfully request opportunity to present evidence of Kira's current academic and emotional well-being, demonstrating adequacy of her present environment. Perfectly phrased request. Respectfully request. Present evidence, academic and emotional well-being, adequacy of present environment. Each phrase chosen for maximum legal impact. Blackwood cuts her off with visible irritation. Miss Caldwell, this court is perfectly capable of determining your daughter's best interests without amateur legal analysis. Sharp dismissal reveals growing unease. If Bryn were truly amateur, her knowledge wouldn't threaten him. His reaction suggests competence recognition he can't acknowledge without undermining predetermined conclusion. Morrison calls Patricia Whitmore, whose testimony paints Bryn as well-meaning but fundamentally limited. Ryan often expressed concerns about Kira's educational opportunities. The neighborhood school, lack of cultural enrichment. He worried about her potential being wasted. Carefully constructed lie. Ryan had defended wife and daughter against family racism and class snobbery. But dead men can't contradict convenient falsehoods told under oath. Pierce's cross-examination reveals shallow Whitmore interest foundation. Mrs. Whitmore, you claim concern for Kira's education. Can you name her current teacher? Patricia hesitates. Well, there are so many teachers. Her current teacher, the person responsible for her daily education. I believe, Mrs. something with a B? Mrs. Briggs. How many times have you visited her classroom? We don't want to interfere. 0 times. You've never visited Kira's school, have you? Each question lands like physical blow. Cross-examination exposes Whitmore ignorance about Kira's actual life, but Blackwood cuts it short. Counselor, this court has heard sufficient testimony about school visits. Move on. Bryn takes notes throughout testimony. Not emotional reactions, but systematic documentation resembling case preparation more than personal anxiety. Her notebook contains precise questions, legal citations, strategic observations suggesting extensive proceeding experience. Gordon Whitmore takes the stand with accustomed to deference bearing. His testimony transforms custody bid into rescue mission, saving Kira from poverty limitations, providing advantages love alone cannot match. Miss Caldwell is clearly devoted to her daughter, but devotion without resources becomes achievement barrier. We offer Kira growth opportunities her current situation simply cannot provide. Seductively reasonable argument. Who could oppose giving children every possible advantage? Gordon's testimony makes Whitmore's appear generous rather than grasping. Pierce's cross-examination exposes financial motivations Gordon prefers concealing. Mr. Whitmore, your brother left life insurance with Kira as beneficiary. You're seeking guardianship of those funds as well, correct? Gordon's expression tightens. Funds would be administered solely for Kira's benefit. Yes or no, are you seeking control of her inheritance? Yes, but $50,000. Not a fortune, but significant for working-class families. Pierce reveals ugly truth underlying Whitmore generosity. Sudden Kira concern coincides with inheritance discovery. They're not just claiming custody. They're claiming dead man's insurance money representing Bryn and Kira's future security. Blackwood sustains Morrison's objection, but financial motive has been exposed. Gallery observers exchange knowing looks. Whitmore rescue narrative becomes less convincing when it includes seizing insurance money. Pierce calls Mrs. Eleanor Briggs, Kira's second-grade teacher. 23 years of elementary education have shown her every parent type. Her testimony about Bryn contradicts every Whitmore assumption. Miss Caldwell attends every parent-teacher conference, every school event, every volunteer opportunity. Kira's homework is always complete, her projects creative and well-researched, and she's one of our most confident, well-adjusted students. Mrs. Briggs describes a mother who reads nightly to her daughter, researches every assignment for context and encouragement, creates stability despite obvious limitations. Kira speaks about her mother with genuine affection and respect. She's clearly the center of Miss Caldwell's world. Morrison's cross-examination shifts focus from emotional bonds to material resources. Mrs. Briggs, you describe Miss Caldwell as involved. Have you visited her home environment? I don't typically conduct home visits, so you can't assess whether the physical environment supports optimal learning. Kira performs exceptionally academically, but you're not qualified to evaluate housing adequacy, are you? Morrison methodically transforms every strength Mrs. Briggs identifies into limitation evidence. Involved parenting can't compensate for inadequate space. Educational support can't substitute for professional resources. Love alone isn't sufficient when competitors offer comprehensive advantages. During testimony, Bryn maintains detailed notes revealing increasingly sophisticated legal strategy understanding. She identifies witness testimony contradictions, notes procedural violations, documents bias that could form appellate argument foundations. Her observations suggest someone with extensive legal proceeding experience. Pierce calls Dr. Kevin Barnes, a child psychologist who evaluated Kira 3 months earlier. Impeccable credentials: Harvard PhD, child development book author, state family court consultant. Kira demonstrates exceptional emotional intelligence and resilience. Her attachment to her mother is healthy and secure. She shows no signs of anxiety or behavioral problems typically associated with inadequate parenting. Dr. Barnes describes a child who thrives despite challenging circumstances, displays confidence and curiosity reflecting excellent nurturing. His psychological evaluation found no evidence supporting Whitmore inadequacy claims. Morrison's cross-examination reveals even expert testimony limitations. Dr. Barnes, you evaluated Kira once, for approximately 2 hours, correct? That's standard for comprehensive psychological assessment. 2 hours. Could you evaluate her long-term educational potential in that brief encounter? Psychological assessment focuses on current functioning. Could you predict future academic achievement based on one meeting? Morrison makes clear that even positive psychological assessment provides inadequate proof of optimal development. Every mother watching this knows the terror of potentially losing your child to a broken system. Bryn's fight isn't just legal, it's personal. Her quiet strength in the face of open racism will inspire you. Don't miss how she turns their weapon against them. Morrison calls Dr. Victoria Ashford an educational consultant specializing in placing gifted children in elite programs. She's evaluated Kira's records and test scores, reaching devastating conclusions for Bryn's case. Kira demonstrates exceptional academic potential. Her IQ tests in the 99th percentile. With proper educational resources, she could excel at the highest achievement levels. Dr. Ashford describes opportunities available only to the wealthy. Specialized programs, individual tutoring, summer academic camps, research opportunities leading to elite university scholarships. She paints unlimited potential constrained by limited resources. Miss Caldwell's financial limitations will inevitably limit Kira's educational opportunities. Talent without resources becomes wasted potential. Devastating testimony because it's true. Bryn's daughter love is unquestioned, but love can't pay for Harvard prep courses or European summer programs. Morrison has transformed custody hearing into educational inequality seminar, with Kira's future as stakes. Pierce's cross-examination attempts challenging expensive education assumptions. Dr. Ashford, are you familiar with studies showing parental involvement as stronger academic success predictor than educational spending? Certainly parental involvement matters. Are you aware Kira currently performs above grade level in all subjects while attending public school? Yes, but with enhanced resources. Are you suggesting Miss Caldwell's current parenting is inadequate? Dr. Ashford hedges, avoiding direct Bryn criticism while maintaining enhanced opportunity arguments. Pierce forces her into uncomfortable positions, suggesting good parenting isn't enough without financial resources. Pierce attempts presenting additional character witnesses, but Blackwood grows increasingly impatient. Counselor, this court has limited time for character parades. Unless your witnesses can address Miss Caldwell's capacity to provide educational opportunities comparable to Whitmore offerings, their testimony is irrelevant. Crystal clear message. Character doesn't matter. Love doesn't matter. Only relevant question is money. And money is what Bryn can't provide at Whitmore levels. Legal battles can destroy families financially. Legal Shield provides unlimited legal consultation, document review, and representation for one low monthly fee. Whether you're facing custody disputes, workplace discrimination, or civil rights violations, having an attorney on your side shouldn't break the bank. Legal Shield members get immediate access to experienced lawyers who understand the system. Don't face legal challenges alone when professional help is affordable. Visit LegalShield.com to protect your family's future today. Morrison's case builds systematically toward inevitable conclusion. Financial resources, educational opportunities, social connections. Every wealth advantage becomes superior parenting capacity evidence. Whitmores aren't portrayed as child buyers. They're presented as benefactors rescuing Kira from poverty limitations. Throughout proceedings, Bryn's reactions suggest someone understanding more than she's revealing. While other defendants might appear increasingly desperate, she demonstrates controlled composure of someone who knows something others don't. Her note-taking becomes more intensive, observations more strategic. Mrs. Palmer, watching from gallery, recognizes something familiar in Bryn's demeanor. The elderly woman has seen institutional bias destroy families for decades, but she's also seen people who know how to fight back. Bryn's behavior reminds her of lawyers, advocates, people with hidden power who choose to appear powerless until revelation moments arrive. Pierce presents Final Witness, Reverend Michael Foster from Mount Olive Baptist Church, where Bryn and Kira attend services. He testifies about Bryn's character, church involvement, dedication to raising Kira with strong moral values. Miss Caldwell is one of our most dedicated congregation members. She volunteers with youth programs, participates in community service, has raised Kira to be respectful, responsible, and spiritually grounded. Morrison's cross-examination dismisses religious values as irrelevant to educational achievement. Reverend Foster, your church is located in the same neighborhood as Miss Caldwell's apartment, correct? Yes, we serve the local community, a community with significant economic challenges. We minister to people of all circumstances, but you can't provide Kira with educational advantages she would receive in more affluent environments? Morrison transforms even spiritual guidance into limitation evidence. Religious instruction becomes real education substitute. Community involvement becomes geographic constraint evidence. Moral values become inadequate compensation for material disadvantages. As witness testimony concludes, accumulated evidence favors Whitmore's overwhelmingly. They offer financial security, educational opportunities, social connections, cultural advantages Bryn cannot match. Love seems inadequate when competitors provide comprehensive superiority. Pierce notices something troubling throughout proceedings. Bryn has displayed knowledge and competence that doesn't match clinic receptionist background. Her legal vocabulary, procedural understanding, strategic thinking suggest experience she hasn't disclosed. Bryn, Pierce whispers during brief recess, is there something you haven't told me? Something about your background? Bryn's response is measured and careful. Diana, I've told you everything relevant to this case. Technically true, but obviously incomplete. Pierce recognizes evasion when she hears it, but understands clients sometimes have reasons for withholding information until strategic moments arrive. Morrison rises for closing arguments with inevitable victory confidence. He summarizes evidence methodically. Whitmore financial resources, educational plans, opportunity provision that love alone cannot supply. Your Honor, this case presents clear choice between emotion and opportunity. Miss Caldwell's devotion to her daughter is undeniable, but devotion without resources becomes limitation. My clients offer Kira chances to develop her exceptional potential. Seductively reasonable argument. Who could oppose giving gifted children every possible advantage? Who would condemn exceptional talent to mediocrity because of misplaced family bond sentiment? Kira deserves more than love. She deserves opportunity. She deserves chances to compete with intellectual peers, develop lifetime serving skills, access success-creating connections and resources in modern society. Closing argument transforms material advantage into moral imperative. Opposing Whitmore's becomes opposing Kira's future, denying her potential, condemning her to waste gifts through misguided attachment to inadequate circumstances. Pierce rises for closing with obvious exhaustion, but her argument carries emotional weight Morrison's financial calculations cannot match. Your Honor, this case is about more than educational opportunities. It's about the irreplaceable bond between mother and child. Pierce argues Kira's current success demonstrates Bryn's parenting adequacy, that emotional security provides achievement foundation, that removing children from loving homes traumatizes rather than benefits development. Miss Caldwell has proven dedication through sacrifice and achievement. Kira excels academically, socially, emotionally under her mother's care. Whitmore's offer money, but they cannot offer unconditional love that has already created this exceptional child. Pierce's argument appeals to traditional maternal bond and family integrity values, but sounds thin against Morrison's competitive advantage and social mobility evidence. Love versus money, in society that consistently chooses money. Blackwood prepares to render judgment with predetermined decision satisfaction. This court has carefully considered evidence presented by both parties. The decision before this court is neither easy nor pleasant, but it is clear. Everyone understands they're witnessing either judicial wisdom or institutional injustice, depending on perspective about whether love or resources should determine children's fates. Miss Caldwell's devotion to her daughter is evident and admirable. However, devotion alone cannot provide educational and social opportunities that will determine this child's future success. Words fall like hammer blows. Bryn's love is admirable but insufficient. Her sacrifice is noted but irrelevant. Her parenting success is acknowledged but overshadowed by financial limitations. The Whitmores offer resources and opportunities that Miss Caldwell simply cannot match. Private education, cultural enrichment, social connections benefiting the child throughout life. This court cannot ignore these advantages out of misplaced sentiment. Misplaced sentiment. The phrase transforms mother's love into emotional weakness. Blackwood has reduced sacred parent-child bonds to character flaws clouding proper judgment. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that immediate custody of the minor child, Kira Caldwell, be transferred to Gordon and Patricia Whitmore, effective immediately. The gavel crashes with guillotine finality. Gallery gasps and murmurs ripple through crowds. Mrs. Palmer covers her face with hands. Diana Pierce stares at the bench in stunned defeat. But Bryn Caldwell simply nods, as if Blackwood has confirmed something she already knew. She stands slowly, gathering papers with the same methodical care displayed throughout the hearing. Her composure facing catastrophic loss unsettles everyone watching. Blackwood isn't finished. Furthermore, Miss Caldwell's visitation rights shall be limited to supervised visits twice monthly, pending demonstration of improved financial stability and proper attitude toward this court's authority. Additional punishment is gratuitous and revealing. Blackwood isn't just transferring custody. He's asserting dominance over a woman who somehow threatened his absolute control sense. Bailiff Krause will coordinate immediate child transfer to her new guardians. Miss Caldwell has 24 hours to pack the child's belongings for pickup. 24 hours. A lifetime of love and sacrifice reduced to single day of packing boxes. Kira will be torn from home, school, friends, entire world, delivered to strangers offering opportunity in exchange for everything familiar. Diana Pierce stands on shaking legs. Your Honor, I request immediate stay of this order pending appeal. Denied. Blackwood's response cuts through her words like blades. This court's ruling stands, and any attempt to interfere with transfer will result in contempt charges. Pierce tries again, desperation cracking professional demeanor. Your Honor, at minimum the child should be allowed to finish the school year. Counselor, Blackwood leans forward, voice carrying unmistakable menace. You are dangerously close to contempt. I suggest you accept this court's wisdom and move on. Threat hangs like poison gas. One more word and Pierce could find herself in jail. She sits heavily, defeated by systems designed to crush opposition. Morrison rises with obvious satisfaction. Your Honor, my clients are prepared to take immediate custody. We have temporary enrollment at Pemberton Academy and all necessary transition arrangements. Of course they do. Transfer has been planned in advance, down to school enrollment and living arrangements. The hearing was theater, performed for legal purposes but irrelevant to predetermined outcomes. Blackwood nods approvingly. Excellent. Bailiff Krause, please coordinate with Mr. Morrison to ensure smooth custody transfer. Krause steps forward with obvious relish. This is the job part he enjoys most, enforcing judicial authority through physical presence and implied violence. Miss Caldwell, you need to come with me to arrange child pickup. The courthouse empties slowly, observers processing what they've witnessed. Justice hasn't been served, it's been purchased. The wealthy have used financial advantage to tear a child from her mother, and the system has not only allowed it but celebrated it as wisdom. But in the chaos of departure, few notice that Bryn Caldwell doesn't appear defeated. Devastated, yes. Heartbroken, certainly, but not defeated. She moves with purposeful calm of someone who understands the difference between losing a battle and losing a war. Mrs. Palmer approaches as Bryn packs her briefcase. Child, I'm so sorry. This isn't right. This isn't justice. Bryn looks up with a slight smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Palmer, sometimes justice takes longer than we'd like, but it always comes. The elderly woman studies Bryn's face, recognizing something she can't quite identify. You sound like you know something the rest of us don't. Bryn closes her briefcase with final click. I know that the truth always surfaces, Mrs. Palmer. It just takes the right moment. As she walks toward the courthouse exit, Bryn passes other families waiting for their hearings. Some face legitimately difficult custody questions. Others confront the same systematic bias she's endured. Her composed departure gives them something, not hope exactly, but the sense that resistance is possible. The setting sun paints courthouse steps in golden light as Bryn descends toward an uncertain future. Tomorrow, she'll return to work at the clinic, pretending everything is normal. But tonight, she has phone calls to make, reports to file, and preparations to complete for the next phase of a plan that's been months in development. Because Judge Sterling Blackwood, Gordon and Patricia Whitmore, and everyone who participated in this judicial travesty have made one critical error. They've assumed that Bryn Caldwell is exactly what she appears to be, A powerless single mother with no resources to fight institutional corruption. They're about to discover how wrong they are. The lock clicks twice, but this time it's not closing, it's opening, and what comes next will change everything forever. 3 days pass like a fever dream. Bryn sits at her desk at the Riverside Community Health Clinic, processing insurance forms and scheduling appointments as if her world hasn't shattered. To her coworkers, she appears to be coping remarkably well with the custody loss. They whisper about her strength, her resilience, her grace under pressure. They have no idea she's operating on autopilot while her mind works on an entirely different level. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the clinic director, stops by Bryn's desk during the lunch break. "Bryn, I wanted to check on you. We all heard about the court decision. I can't imagine how you're feeling." Bryn looks up from her computer screen, her smile automatic and empty. "I'm managing, Dr. Martinez. Thank you for asking. If you need time off, we understand. Family court situations can be traumatic, especially when the outcome isn't what you hoped for." Traumatic. The word doesn't begin to capture the systematic destruction she's witnessed, but Bryn nods appreciatively. "I appreciate the support. Work helps keep my mind occupied." Dr. Martinez lingers, studying Bryn's face with the clinical observation skills that make her an excellent physician. Something doesn't quite fit. Most people facing such devastating loss would show more emotional distress. Bryn's composure seems almost professional. "Bryn, in all the years you've worked here, you've always been extremely competent. But lately, I've noticed your organizational skills, your attention to detail, your way of handling complex situations. It's beyond what most people in your position demonstrate. Have you ever considered going back to school? Perhaps pursuing something in the legal field?" The observation is uncomfortably accurate. Bryn has been careful to maintain her cover, but 3 years of working the same job while developing different skills has created inconsistencies that astute people notice. "I've always been detail-oriented," Bryn responds carefully. "The custody case forced me to learn more about legal procedures than I ever wanted to know." "It's technically true, but incomplete, Doctor." Martinez nods, seemingly satisfied, but her expression suggests lingering curiosity about the woman who's worked under her supervision for 3 years. After Dr. Martinez leaves, Bryn returns to her computer, but she's not processing insurance claims. Hidden behind the clinic's patient management software, she accesses encrypted files that would surprise anyone who discovered them. Case notes, surveillance reports, evidence logs, the real work she's been conducting while maintaining her cover as a struggling single mother. Her phone buzzes with a text message that appears to be from Diana Pierce. "Need to discuss appeal strategy. Can you meet tonight?" But the message contains additional elements that most people wouldn't notice. Specific word choices and timing that indicate it's not actually from her attorney. Bryn responds with equal care. 7 p.m. at the usual place. I'll bring the files we discussed. To anyone monitoring her communications, it appears to be a standard consultation between client and attorney. In reality, it's a coded message confirming tonight's debriefing with her federal handlers. The Riverside Park Pavilion sits empty at 7:15 p.m., the autumn chill keeping most people indoors. Bryn arrives carrying a thermos of coffee and a manila folder, looking like someone preparing for a legal consultation. She chooses a picnic table positioned to observe all approaches while providing cover from casual observation. Agent Sarah Mitchell emerges from the tree line 15 minutes later, her appearance so ordinary she could be any suburban mother taking an evening walk. She carries a small backpack and moves with the relaxed confidence of someone familiar with surveillance protocols. "Agent Caldwell," she says quietly, settling onto the bench across from Bryn. "How are you holding up?" The use of her real title provides momentary relief from the identity she's been maintaining. The cover is holding, but it's getting harder to maintain. Dr. Martinez is asking questions about my background. I think my legal knowledge during the custody case raised suspicions. Mitchell nods. That was unavoidable. You had to demonstrate enough competence to make the proceedings believable without blowing your cover entirely. We expected some curiosity. What's the status on the financial surveillance? Bryn asks, opening her folder to reveal documents that definitely don't belong to a clinic receptionist. Mitchell produces a tablet from her backpack, its screen displaying banking records, wire transfer logs, and communication intercepts. We've documented 17 separate bribery transactions over the past 18 months. Blackwood has received $430,000 through various shell companies and trust funds. The scope exceeds even Bryn's estimates. 17 families? 17 cases where wealthy petitioners paid for predetermined outcomes. Custody battles, adoption proceedings, juvenile delinquency cases where parents wanted charges dismissed. Blackwood has been operating a judicial auction house. Each case represents a family destroyed by corruption. Children separated from loving parents. Justice sold to the highest bidder. The systematic nature of the operation makes Bryn's individual case part of a much larger criminal enterprise. The Whitmore payments? Mitchell scrolls through financial records. $250,000, transferred through 3 different offshore accounts. But we've discovered something interesting about their motivation that goes beyond simple custody preference. She displays insurance documents and financial statements that reveal the true scope of the Whitmore conspiracy. Ryan Caldwell didn't just leave a $50,000 life insurance policy. He had a substantial investment portfolio that his family never mentioned. The total inheritance is closer to $300,000. The revelation hits like a physical blow. The Whitmores weren't just claiming custody of Kira. They were stealing a fortune that rightfully belongs to her daughter. Their rescue narrative becomes even more grotesque when viewed as elaborate theft disguised as grandparental concern. They knew about the additional assets. Patricia Whitmore was Ryan's financial beneficiary contact. She's known about the full inheritance since 6 months after his death. They've been planning this custody grab ever since they discovered the money. Bryn processes the implications. Her late husband, who died believing his modest insurance policy would provide basic security for his family, had actually left enough money to pay for Kira's college education and provide substantial financial security. The Whitmores have been systematically stealing her daughter's future while presenting themselves as benefactors. Do we have evidence of their knowledge and planning? Mitchell displays email communications intercepted through federal surveillance, extensive correspondence between Patricia and Gordon discussing the inheritance, legal strategies for gaining custody, and communications with Judge Blackwood about ensuring favorable outcomes. The evidence creates a comprehensive picture of criminal conspiracy that extends far beyond judicial bribery. The Whitmores have committed inheritance fraud, conspiracy to deprive civil rights, and child trafficking under federal law. When do we move? Bryn asks, her professional objectivity barely containing her personal fury. The decision isn't ours alone, Mitchell explains. This investigation has attracted attention at the highest levels. The systematic nature of the corruption, the number of families affected, the amounts of money involved. This has become a priority case for the Department of Justice. She produces additional documents that reveal the true scope of federal interest. We've identified connections to 3 other judges in neighboring jurisdictions, 2 court clerks who facilitate case assignments, and a network of attorneys who specialize in buying favorable outcomes for wealthy clients. The corruption extends beyond individual cases to systematic perversion of the judicial system. Blackwood isn't just a corrupt judge. He's a key player in a criminal organization that has turned family courts into profit centers for the wealthy and connected. The timing is critical, Mitchell continues. We need Blackwood to commit additional federal crimes that will ensure lengthy prison sentences. We need the Whitmores to take possession of Kira so we can document the completion of their conspiracy. And we need to coordinate arrests to prevent evidence destruction. Bryn understands the strategic calculation, but the personal cost makes her voice tight. How long do I have to watch my daughter live with people who bought her? Mitchell's expression softens. 48 hours maximum. Kira will be back with you by this weekend, but we need those 48 hours to build cases that will put these people in federal prison for decades. The promise provides limited comfort, but Bryn recognizes the necessity. Individual justice matters less than systematic reform that will prevent other families from suffering similar destruction. What's my role during the final phase? Maintain your cover completely. Go to work. Follow the visitation schedule Blackwood established. Behave like a devastated mother, complying with court orders. Any deviation from expected behavior could alert the targets. Mitchell hands her a small device that resembles a typical smartphone. This is a federal evidence recorder. It captures audio and video with courtroom-quality authentication. Document every interaction with the Whitmores, every conversation with court personnel, every contact that demonstrates ongoing conspiracy. The device represents the difference between her real identity and her cover. As Agent Caldwell, she's authorized to conduct federal surveillance operations. As Bryn Caldwell, clinic receptionist, she's a grieving mother gathering evidence for appeals that will never come. There's one more thing, Mitchell says, her expression growing serious. We've received intelligence that suggests Blackwood may suspect something about your background. Bryn's pulse quickens. What kind of intelligence? Surveillance of his communications shows increased paranoia about the custody case. He's been researching your employment history, making inquiries about your legal knowledge, and expressing concern about your composure during the proceedings. If Blackwood discovers her true identity, the entire operation collapses. Months of investigation, evidence gathering, and strategic planning would be destroyed. Worse, Bryn could face criminal charges for conducting unauthorized surveillance operations. How much does he suspect? Unclear. He knows you're not what you appear to be, but he may attribute your knowledge to desperation-driven research rather than professional training. The key is maintaining perfect consistency with your established cover. Mitchell packs the tablet back into her backpack, their meeting concluding with the efficiency of people accustomed to clandestine operations. Remember, Agent Caldwell, in 48 hours this will be over. Justice will be served, families will be reunited, and systematic corruption will be exposed. You've done exceptional work under impossible circumstances. As Mitchell disappears back into the tree line, Bryn sits alone in the gathering darkness. Tomorrow, she'll see Kira for the first supervised visitation. 2 hours in a sterile room with a social worker monitoring their every interaction. She'll have to pretend to be grateful for the opportunity while documenting evidence that will ultimately destroy the people who stole her daughter. But tonight, she allows herself a moment of genuine grief for the time lost, the trauma inflicted, and the system that requires such elaborate deception to achieve basic justice. The phone in her purse buzzes with a text message from an unknown number. "Mommy, when are you coming to get me? I don't like it here." The message carries the heartbreak of an 8-year-old girl who doesn't understand why her world has been turned upside down. Bryn types her response carefully. "Very soon, baby girl. Mommy loves you more than the whole world." She deletes the message thread immediately. Evidence of unauthorized contact could jeopardize the custody transfer and compromise the federal operation. 48 hours. Justice for dozens of families hangs in the balance, but all Bryn can think about is her daughter's voice asking when she's coming home. Knowledge is power, especially when facing legal challenges. Legal Eagle Academy offers comprehensive courses in understanding your rights, legal documentation, and courtroom procedures. Learn from experienced attorneys through interactive modules covering family law, civil rights, and federal procedures. Our evidence collection course has helped thousands document cases that courts accept. Whether you're protecting your family or advancing your career, legal education is an investment in your future. Enroll today and never feel powerless in legal situations again. The Whitmore estate sits behind iron gates that seem designed more for show than security. Bryn approaches the guardhouse at exactly 2 p.m., carrying a small bag of Kira's favorite snacks and a digital camera for the supervised visitation photographs she's been required to provide to the court. Security guard Davis checks his clipboard with exaggerated officiousness. "Miss Caldwell for supervised visitation with the minor child. You're limited to 2 hours in the main parlor under social worker supervision. No private conversations, no gifts beyond pre-approved snacks, no physical contact beyond brief hugs at greeting and departure." The restrictions sound like prison visitation rules rather than family interaction guidelines. Bryn nods compliance while mentally documenting every procedural violation of standard family reunification practices. The Whitmore mansion overwhelms through sheer size rather than aesthetic appeal. 12,000 square feet of marble, crystal, and imported furniture create the impression of a luxury hotel rather than a family home. Nothing suggests the presence of a child. No toys, no colorful decorations, no evidence that an 8-year-old's joy has touched this sterile environment. Patricia Whitmore greets Bryn at the front door with the condescending smile of someone demonstrating charity toward the less fortunate. "Miss Caldwell, welcome to our home. We're so pleased you could visit Kira today." The phrasing transforms Bryn from mother to visitor, Kira from daughter to ward, and the Whitmore house from theft to legitimate custody. The psychological manipulation begins before they've moved beyond the foyer. "Where is Kira?" Bryn asks, her voice carefully controlled. "She's finishing her afternoon lessons with Miss Catherine, her new governess. We believe in maintaining structured educational schedules that optimize learning opportunities. Afternoon lessons, governess, structured schedules." 8-year-old Kira, who 3 days ago was playing with friends at the community center after school, is now subjected to private tutoring designed to remake her into someone the Whitmores consider acceptable. Social worker. Jennifer Hayes sits in the parlor with a clipboard and digital recorder, her expression professionally neutral but her discomfort obvious. State-mandated supervision for family visits typically occurs in neutral locations, offices or supervised visitation centers. Conducting these visits in the Whitmore's home gives them psychological advantage while limiting Bryn's parental authority. "Miss Caldwell, Hayes explains, I'm required to monitor all interactions and ensure compliance with court-ordered restrictions. Please remember that any discussion of legal proceedings, custody arrangements, or criticism of the current placement could result in termination of visitation privileges. The restrictions effectively gag Bryn from providing her daughter with honest explanations about their situation. She can't discuss the court case, can't criticize the Whitmores, can't even express hope for reunion without violating judicial orders. Kira enters the parlor 15 minutes later, her appearance shocking Bryn into momentary silence. The child's natural hair has been straightened and pulled into a severe bun. Her colorful clothes have been replaced with a navy dress that resembles a prep school uniform. Most disturbing, her usual bright smile has been replaced with the careful politeness of someone learning to suppress her natural personality. "Hello, Mother," Kira says formally, her voice carrying unfamiliar restraint. Mother. Not Mama, not Mommy, but the formal address Patricia Whitmore has obviously been drilling into her. The psychological manipulation has begun immediately, designed to create distance between parent and child while reinforcing the Whitmore's authority. Bryn kneels to embrace her daughter, noting the tension in Kira's small body. "Hi, baby girl. I've missed you so much. Miss Catherine says I should call you birth mother to avoid confusion about my family structure," Kira says quietly, her 8-year-old voice struggling with concepts she doesn't understand. The revelation makes Bryn's blood run cold. Within 3 days, the Whitmores have begun systematic psychological abuse designed to sever Kira's emotional connection to her biological mother. They're not just claiming custody, they're attempting to erase Bryn from her daughter's identity. "What do you want to call me?" Bryn asks gently, aware that Hayes is recording every word. Kira glances toward the doorway where Patricia Whitmore lingers, clearly monitoring the conversation. I want to call you Mommy, but Miss Catherine says that might confuse my new family." The child's confusion breaks Bryn's heart, but it also provides evidence of psychological manipulation that federal prosecutors will use to demonstrate the extent of the conspiracy. The Whitmores aren't providing Kira with advantages. They're systematically destroying her sense of identity and family connection. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," Bryn says carefully. "I'll always be your mommy, no matter what anyone else says." Hayes makes a note on her clipboard. Technically, Bryn hasn't violated the restrictions against discussing custody arrangements, but her reassurance contradicts the narrative the Whitmores are creating. "Tell me about your new school," Bryn prompts, activating the recording device hidden in her purse. Kira's response reveals the systematic isolation the Whitmores have imposed. "I don't go to regular school anymore. Miss Catherine teaches me at home. She says public school was holding back my intellectual development." Homeschooling eliminates Kira's contact with friends, teachers, and other adults who might report concerns about her welfare. The Whitmores have effectively isolated her from everyone who knows her history and personality. "Do you miss your friends from Mrs. Briggs's class?" Kira's eyes fill with tears, but she blinks them away with the self-control of someone learning to hide emotions. "Miss Catherine says I'll make more appropriate friends when I start at Pemberton Academy next year. She says my old friends were unsuitable for my new social position." Unsuitable. The 8-year-old struggles with the word, clearly repeating adult language she doesn't fully understand. The Whitmores are teaching her to view her previous life, including her friendships, as inferior and inappropriate. Patricia Whitmore enters the parlor with a tea service that seems designed more for display than consumption. "How are you finding Kira's progress, Miss Caldwell? We've been working with educational specialists to accelerate her development." The phrasing suggests Kira was previously underdeveloped rather than thriving in her original environment. Bryn forces herself to respond politely while documenting every example of psychological manipulation. "She seems very serious," Bryn observes carefully. "Children of her intellectual caliber require more structured environments," Patricia explains. "We're helping her understand the responsibilities that come with privilege. Proper deportment, appropriate social interactions, academic excellence. These skills will serve her throughout life." The explanation transforms natural childhood joy into intellectual deficiency. Kira is being trained to suppress her personality in favor of behaviors the Whitmores consider appropriate for their social class. "Has she been able to continue her African dance classes?" Bryn asks, knowing the answer but needing the response on record. Patricia's expression reveals her true feelings about African dance. "We've enrolled her in classical ballet instead, much more suitable for her future social circles. Classical ballet replaces African dance. Appropriate friends replace unsuitable ones. Structured education replaces public school interaction." The Whitmores are systematically erasing every connection to Kira's cultural identity and personal history. During the 2-hour visit, Bryn documents numerous examples of psychological manipulation, cultural erasure, and emotional abuse disguised as educational enhancement. The federal recording device captures Patricia's dismissive comments about Kira's previous life, her instructions about appropriate behavior, and her obvious discomfort when Kira displays affection toward her biological mother. As the visit concludes, Kira whispers urgently during their goodbye embrace. Mommy, when can I come home? I tried to be good, but Miss Catherine says I'm still too emotional for a proper young lady. The desperation in her daughter's voice nearly breaks Bryn's composure, but she maintains the emotional control necessary to protect the federal operation. Very soon, baby girl. Keep being yourself, no matter what anyone tells you. Hayes documents the exchange, but doesn't intervene. Even she seems disturbed by the psychological pressure being placed on an 8-year-old child. Driving away from the Whitmore estate, Bryn pulls over at a gas station and calls the number Mitchell provided for emergency contact. This is Agent Caldwell. I need to report systematic child abuse in progress. Agent Caldwell, this is Agent Cole. Are you secure? Secure. The Whitmores are conducting psychological warfare against an 8-year-old child. Cultural erasure, identity destruction, emotional manipulation, everything we suspected and worse. Document everything. We move tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. 24 more hours of watching her daughter suffer abuse while federal agents build cases against the perpetrators. Justice demands patience, but motherhood demands action. Agent Cole, if this operation delays any longer, the psychological damage to my daughter could be permanent. Understood, Agent Caldwell. Justice will be served tomorrow, I promise. The line goes dead, leaving Bryn alone in a gas station parking lot with the weight of watching systematic abuse while maintaining cover for federal operations. She's an experienced law enforcement officer who understands the necessity of strategic patience, but she's also a mother watching her child's spirit being systematically destroyed. That night, Bryn sits in her empty apartment, surrounded by Kira's belongings and the silence of institutional injustice. But tomorrow the trap springs. Tomorrow, corrupt judges and criminal conspirators face federal justice. Tomorrow, families stolen by systematic corruption begin their journey toward reunion. The lock clicks twice. This time, it's opening to release justice that has been building pressure for months. Thursday morning arrives with the weight of orchestrated destiny. Bryn reports to the clinic at 8 a.m., maintaining her routine with precise normalcy while federal agents position themselves for the largest judicial corruption takedown in the district's history. To her co-workers, she appears to be coping remarkably well with the custody loss. They have no idea she's operating the final phase of a federal sting operation. Dr. Martinez stops by her desk at 9:15 a.m. Bryn, I wanted to remind you that if you need time off for appeals or legal consultations, we completely understand. Family court situations require significant emotional processing. I appreciate the support, Mia, Bryn responds automatically. I'm managing day by day. Her phone buzzes with what appears to be a routine appointment confirmation. Dental cleaning today at 2 p.m. Dr. Peterson's office. To anyone monitoring her communications, it's mundane healthcare maintenance. In reality, it's the go signal for Operation Clean Bench. Federal agents are in position, surveillance equipment is active, and the trap is ready to spring. Bryn types her response. Confirmed. Looking forward to better oral health. The coded reply indicates she's prepared for her role in the afternoon's events. At 11:30 a.m., Diana Pierce calls with what sounds like routine legal consultation. Bryn, I've scheduled an emergency hearing for this afternoon. Judge Blackwood agreed to consider new evidence that might affect the custody arrangement. The call is partially legitimate. There will indeed be an emergency hearing. But Pierce doesn't mention that federal agents orchestrated the session, that the evidence will expose years of systematic corruption, or that everyone involved in the conspiracy is walking into federal custody. What kind of evidence, what? Bryn asks, playing her role perfectly. Procedural irregularities that might invalidate the original ruling. I can't say more over the phone, but this could change everything. Pierce's voice carries hope that's partially genuine and partially performance. She knows about Bryn's true identity and the federal operation, but her emotional investment in achieving justice for her client is authentic. Bryn arrives at the courthouse at 2 p.m., carrying the same manila folder and worn purse that have become familiar props in her performance as desperate single mother. But today, the folder contains federal evidence authentication documents, and her purse holds recording equipment that will document the final acts of a criminal conspiracy. The courthouse buzzes with unusual activity. Additional security personnel have been positioned throughout the building, though their federal credentials remain concealed. Court reporters, bailiffs, and administrative staff go about their normal routines, unaware they're about to witness the systematic destruction of judicial corruption they've enabled through silence or active participation. Mrs. Dorothy Palmer takes her usual seat in the gallery, accompanied by several community members who've followed Bryn's case with growing outrage. They expect to witness another example of institutional bias against working-class families of color. They have no idea they're about to see justice served with federal authority. Judge Sterling Blackwood enters the courtroom with the satisfaction of someone who believes he's successfully completed a profitable transaction. He's received payment for ensuring the Whitmore custody victory, established his dominance over a challenging defendant, and maintained his reputation as a judge who makes difficult decisions based on children's best interests rather than sentimental family attachment. This court will hear the emergency motion filed by Ms. Pierce regarding procedural irregularities in the custody determination. Blackwood announces, his voice carrying the patient authority of someone indulging frivolous appeals. Pierce rises with carefully orchestrated urgency. Your Honor, I have evidence of systematic violations of due process that require immediate court attention and potential invalidation of previous rulings. Morrison objects before Pierce can continue. Your Honor, this appears to be harassment litigation designed to delay the implementation of this court's wise judgment. My clients have legal custody, and Miss Caldwell's continued challenges waste valuable court time. But Blackwood seems more concerned than irritated by Pierce's motion. Something about the phrasing, systematic violations and court attention, suggests scope beyond typical post-judgment desperation. Miss Pierce, what specific procedural irregularities are you alleging? Pierce opens her briefcase and produces documents that look suspiciously official. Your Honor, I have evidence of unauthorized communications between this court and the petitioners that violate judicial ethics and potentially constitute criminal activity. The word criminal electrifies the courtroom. Morrison leaps to his feet with obvious panic, but Blackwood's reaction is more telling. His face drains of color as he realizes Pierce isn't making desperate legal arguments. She's making accusations that could destroy his career and freedom. That is an extremely serious allegation, Counselor. Do you have evidence to support such claims? Before Pierce can respond, Bryn stands with quiet authority that seems to fill the courtroom. Your Honor, I request permission to present evidence of federal crimes that have come to my attention during these proceedings. Her voice carries confidence that surprises everyone who's watched her apparent victimization. This isn't the desperate plea of a mother facing defeat. It's the controlled presentation of someone who's been building toward this moment for months. Federal crimes, Blackwood demands, but his voice lacks its previous authority. Bryn opens her briefcase and removes materials that clearly don't belong to a clinic receptionist. Federal forms, evidence authentication certificates, surveillance documentation. Your Honor, I have recordings of communications, financial transaction records, and witness testimony that demonstrate systematic judicial corruption. The specificity shocks everyone present. Recordings require equipment and legal authority. Financial records require access and analysis capability. Witness testimony suggests investigation far beyond what a desperate mother could accomplish alone. Morrison objects frantically. Your Honor, this is clearly fabrication designed to delay legitimate custody arrangements. Miss Caldwell lacks resources or expertise to conduct such investigations. But Bryn's response demonstrates knowledge that supports her claims. Mr. Morrison, Federal Rule of Evidence 901 requires authentication of recorded communications through verified chain of custody, which I am prepared to provide under proper authority. She knows Rule 901. She understands federal evidence requirements. Her legal knowledge continues to exceed what any clinic receptionist should possess, suggesting background that hasn't been disclosed. Blackwood attempts to reassert control, but his authority wavers as he realizes he's facing something unprecedented. Miss Caldwell, even if such evidence exists, the proper forum for corruption allegations is the Judicial Conduct Board, not emergency custody hearings. Bryn's response reveals comprehensive understanding of both procedural law and federal jurisdiction. Your Honor, Title 18, United States Code Section 1951 requires that evidence of federal crimes be presented to appropriate authorities immediately upon discovery. Delaying presentation could constitute obstruction of justice. The Hobbs Act, federal criminal law, obstruction charges. Bryn's knowledge has moved far beyond family court procedures into areas requiring specialized law enforcement training. Pierce supports her client with growing confidence. Your Honor, these allegations, if substantiated, would invalidate not only this custody determination but potentially dozens of other cases handled by this court. The threat expands beyond individual corruption to systematic perversion of justice affecting multiple families. Blackwood faces exposure of criminal enterprise rather than isolated ethical lapses. You think you know how this ends, but trust me, you don't. The evidence she's about to present will shock the entire courtroom. This isn't just about custody anymore. It's about exposing corruption at the highest levels. The revelation is coming. Bryn begins presenting evidence with systematic precision that suggests extensive experience in federal case development. Your Honor, I'll begin with recorded communications between Gordon Whitmore and individuals identified as court personnel discussing predetermined custody outcomes. She activates a digital recording device that produces courtroom-quality audio. Gordon Whitmore's voice fills the space. The arrangements we discussed are proceeding smoothly. The $250,000 has been transferred as agreed. The response, in a voice unmistakably Blackwood's, confirms receipt. The custody determination will proceed as planned. Miss Caldwell's objections will be overruled, and your family will receive full custody with minimal visitation restrictions. The recording devastates everyone present. It establishes financial payment, predetermined outcomes, and judicial corruption that invalidates everything preceding it. Gordon Whitmore's face drains completely of color while Patricia looks physically ill. Morrison objects desperately. Your Honor, this recording lacks proper authentication and could be fabricated using modern audio technology. Bryn produces federal authentication documents. Chain of custody begins with authorized surveillance equipment recorded on tamper-proof digital media and authenticated through FBI laboratory analysis. FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the agency that investigates judicial corruption and civil rights violations. Bryn's evidence isn't just professional, it's federal, suggesting authority that transforms her from victim to prosecutor. The courtroom erupts as observers process the implications. Mrs. Palmer gasps audibly. Court personnel exchange worried glances. Even Bailiff Krause appears nervous as he realizes his role in intimidation might constitute federal crimes. Blackwood's composure crumbles as he understands the scope of investigation surrounding him. Miss Caldwell, if federal authorities are involved, proper procedure requires notification and coordination. Your Honor, Bryn interrupts with calm authority, proper procedure requires that you cease all actions that could constitute obstruction of an ongoing federal investigation. Her tone has transformed completely. The desperate mother has been replaced by someone speaking with federal law enforcement authority. Everyone recognizes that power dynamics have shifted fundamentally. Pierce produces additional evidence expanding corruption scope. Your Honor, we have documentation of similar arrangements in 23 other custody cases over the past 2 years, all involving wealthy petitioners and predetermined outcomes. 23 cases, 2 years of systematic corruption, dozens of families affected by purchased justice. The custody hearing has become the entry point to massive federal investigation threatening to destroy careers and send conspirators to prison for decades. Bryn continues her methodical evidence presentation. Financial records show wire transfers totaling $600,000 to accounts controlled by Judge Blackwood over 18 months, with payments corresponding to specific case outcomes. $600,000. Systematic bribery. 18 months of criminal enterprise. The evidence reveals not just individual corruption, but organized criminal activity that has perverted justice across multiple jurisdictions. Gordon Whitmore attempts damage control with obvious desperation. Your Honor, we had no knowledge of irregular communications. We retained counsel for legitimate custody proceedings. But Bryn produces email communications that contradict his claims. Mr. Whitmore, these intercepted messages show extensive correspondence between you and court personnel discussing case strategy, payment schedules, and outcome guarantees. The emails reveal detailed criminal conspiracy, extending beyond simple bribery to systematic manipulation of family court proceedings. Every element of their custody victory was purchased rather than earned through legitimate legal argument. Patricia Whitmore breaks down completely as she realizes their attempt to gain custody has become evidence in federal criminal prosecution. Gordon, you told me these were just legal fees. You said Mr. Morrison needed additional resources for proper case preparation. Her husband's silence confirms her growing understanding that she's been complicit in criminal conspiracy without realizing its scope. Their rescue mission for Kira has become federal crime carrying potential sentences of decades in prison. As evidence accumulates, the courtroom atmosphere becomes increasingly tense. Local reporters realize they're witnessing judicial corruption exposure of historic proportions. Court personnel understand their roles in enabling systematic injustice face federal scrutiny. But the biggest revelation still awaits: the complete truth about Bryn's identity and the federal operation that has been building around this case for months. Bryn reaches into her briefcase and removes what appears to be a simple identification folder. Your Honor, before presenting additional evidence, I believe this court needs to understand exactly who has been conducting this investigation. She opens the folder to reveal federal credentials that shock everyone into absolute silence. My name is Special Agent Bryn Caldwell, Federal Bureau of Investigation, badge number 4471. The words explode through the courtroom like concussion grenades. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Movement freezes. Even the court reporter's fingers pause above her keyboard as she processes the magnitude of what's been revealed. For the past 6 months, I have been conducting an undercover investigation into systematic judicial corruption as part of Operation Clean Bench. Federal Case Number 2024-CR-0847. Federal Agent Undercover Investigation. Operation Clean Bench. The custody battle has been federal sting operation from the beginning, with Bryn serving as both victim and prosecutor in an elaborate trap designed to document criminal conspiracy. Judge Blackwood grips his bench with white knuckles as 37 years of judicial authority evaporate. The woman he's been intimidating and dismissing is a federal agent with authority that supersedes his completely. Morrison rises on unsteady legs, his legal arguments transformed into potential evidence of conspiracy. Your Honor, this revelation invalidates these entire proceedings. Miss Caldwell, Agent Caldwell, has operated under false pretenses, but Bryn's response demonstrates the legal foundation for her investigation. Mr. Morrison, undercover federal operations are authorized under Title 28, United States Code, when investigating systematic violation of civil rights under color of law. Her knowledge of federal law is encyclopedic because it's professional rather than researched. Every legal citation, every procedural understanding, every strategic decision has been the product of federal law enforcement training and experience. Pierce reveals her own role in the operation. Your Honor, as Agent Caldwell's legal counsel, I've been documenting procedural violations and constitutional deprivations that form the foundation for federal prosecution under multiple statutes. The public defender has been federal collaborator, providing legal cover for the investigation while building evidence for criminal charges that will destroy everyone involved in the conspiracy. Agent Sarah Mitchell enters through the main courtroom doors, flanked by Agent Dane Cole and Federal Marshal Rita Webb. They don't announce themselves or create dramatic scenes. They simply walk with federal authority that needs no introduction. Mitchell approaches the bench with badge extended. Agent Mitchell, FBI. Judge Blackwood, this courtroom is now under federal jurisdiction for evidence preservation in an ongoing criminal investigation. Blackwood finally finds his voice, though it carries none of its former authority. Agent Mitchell, this is highly irregular. This court maintains jurisdiction over custody proceedings. Had jurisdiction, Mitchell corrects. The moment you accepted bribes to influence judicial decisions, this became federal matter under the Hobbs Act and civil rights violations. She produces an arrest warrant thick enough to represent years of investigation. Judge Sterling Blackwood, you are under arrest for accepting bribes in violation of federal law, conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of authority, and money laundering in connection with organized criminal activity. Each charge carries decades in federal prison. Blackwood's judicial authority, which seemed absolute hours ago, becomes evidence of the scope of his criminal liability. Agent Cole addresses the Whitmores with bureaucratic precision that makes their situation clear. Gordon and Patricia Whitmore, you are under arrest for conspiracy to bribe public officials, money laundering, and violation of federal civil rights statutes. The handcuffs click around their wrists with symbolic finality. Patricia weeps with genuine terror as she realizes their social position provides no protection from federal prosecution. Gordon maintains silence, but his expression reveals understanding that their wealth has become evidence of their guilt. Morrison faces his own reckoning as Agent Cole continues. Jack Morrison, you're being detained for questioning regarding your participation in systematic judicial corruption. Based on our investigation, you will face federal charges for conspiracy and money laundering. The attorney who argued so eloquently about children's best interests now faces prosecution for participating in organized crime. Every legal argument he made becomes evidence of his willingness to participate in corruption disguised as advocacy. As federal marshals lead the conspirators from the courtroom, Bryn allows her professional mask to slip momentarily. Relief, exhaustion, and overwhelming emotion crack her federal agent composure as she realizes the operation has succeeded beyond all expectations. Mrs. Palmer approaches with tears streaming down her face. Child, you were federal all along. You let them put you through that pain for justice? Bryn nods, her voice thick with emotion. 6 months undercover, Mrs. Palmer. Every insult, every threat, every moment of watching systematic racism destroy families. All of it was evidence for prosecution that will send criminals to prison and reform the system. The elderly woman embraces Bryn with fierce pride. You sacrificed everything to protect all of us. You're a hero, child. But Bryn shakes her head. Not a hero, Mrs. Palmer. Just someone who refused to let corruption win. Agent Mitchell begins briefing media representatives who've arrived to document the arrests. Today's operation represents the culmination of an 18-month federal investigation into systematic judicial corruption affecting dozens of families across multiple jurisdictions. The press conference reveals the true scope of Operation Clean Bench, not just individual corruption, but organized criminal enterprise that has perverted family courts throughout the region. Federal agents have arrested 12 individuals, including 3 judges, 2 court administrators, and 7 attorneys who participated in systematic bribery schemes affecting family court proceedings. 12 arrests, multiple jurisdictions, years of systematic corruption exposed through single undercover operation. The investigation will reform judicial systems while providing justice for families destroyed by purchased verdicts. Pierce embraces Bryn with genuine emotion. Agent Caldwell, working with you has been the honor of my career. You've shown that sometimes the system works when good people refuse to let it fail. But Bryn's response reveals the personal cost of professional duty. I nearly lost my daughter to save other families, Diana. Justice demands sacrifices that shouldn't be necessary. As the courtroom empties, federal agents coordinate evidence preservation and witness interviews. The operation's success exceeds all expectations. But Bryn understands that individual victory matters less than systematic reform that will protect future families from similar destruction. Tomorrow, the real work begins, building federal cases that will put criminals in prison for decades while reforming judicial systems to prevent similar corruption. But tonight, Bryn Caldwell goes home to her daughter, finally able to be both mother and federal agent without choosing between them. Justice was served, but this is just one case. How many other corrupt officials are operating right now? Our next story exposes a police chief who thought his badge made him untouchable until he targeted the wrong veteran. Subscribe to see the power crumble when it meets true courage. The federal building buzzes with activity as prosecutors coordinate the largest judicial corruption case in district history. Agent Mitchell leads Bryn through corridors lined with evidence boxes, interview transcripts, and financial documentation that will send corrupt officials to prison for decades. Agent Caldwell, the scope of this operation exceeded our most optimistic projections, Mitchell explains as they enter the secure briefing room. Your undercover work has exposed criminal networks we didn't know existed. The briefing room walls display organizational charts connecting corrupt judges, attorneys, court personnel, and wealthy clients who've purchased justice through systematic bribery. The conspiracy extends far beyond individual corruption to organized criminal enterprise operating across multiple states. Preliminary estimates suggest over 200 families have been affected by purchased judicial decisions over the past 5 years, Agent Cole reports. Custody cases, adoption proceedings, juvenile court decisions, systematic corruption affecting the most vulnerable populations. 200 families, thousands of children separated from loving parents through purchased verdicts. The magnitude of systematic injustice revealed through Bryn's investigation exceeds anything federal prosecutors have previously encountered. What's the status on victim identification and family reunification, Bryn asks, her maternal instincts extending to all families affected by the corruption network. Victim advocacy teams are reviewing every case handled by the arrested judges and attorneys, Mitchell responds. Families will be contacted, cases will be reviewed for procedural violations, and custody determinations made through bribery will be overturned. Federal victim services represent hope for families who lost children to systematic corruption, but the process will take months to complete. Justice delayed by corruption requires extensive investigation to restore. Agent Caldwell, your daughter Kira is being released to your custody immediately, Agent Cole confirms. Federal protective custody protocols remain in place pending completion of prosecutions, but you can return home today. The words Bryn has waited 6 months to hear finally arrive. Kira comes home, the family destroyed by systematic corruption is restored, and justice prevails over institutional bias and organized crime. 6 weeks later, Bryn sits in federal district court as prosecutors present opening arguments in United States v. Blackwood, the largest judicial corruption trial in state history. Judge Maria Santos, assigned from neighboring jurisdiction to avoid any connection to the conspiracy, presides over proceedings that will determine the fate of systematic corruption exposed through Operation Clean Bench. The prosecution table displays evidence boxes containing 18 months of investigation, recorded communications, financial records, victim testimony from dozens of families affected by purchased verdicts. Federal prosecutors have built cases that even skilled defense attorneys cannot overcome. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Federal Prosecutor Helena Warren begins her opening statement. The evidence will show that Judge Sterling Blackwood transformed family court proceedings into criminal enterprises where justice was sold to the highest bidder. Warren displays financial charts showing $600,000 in bribes received by Blackwood coordinated through shell companies and offshore accounts to avoid detection. The systematic nature of the corruption eliminates any possibility of claiming isolated lapses in judgment. Over 2 years, Judge Blackwood received payments for predetermined outcomes in 27 family court cases. Children were separated from loving parents. Custody was awarded to abusive relatives, and adoption proceedings were manipulated, all because wealthy petitioners paid for favorable rulings. 27 cases, dozens of families destroyed, hundreds of thousands of dollars in systematic bribery. The prosecution's case overwhelms through sheer scope and comprehensive documentation. Defense attorney Marcus Holbrook attempts to minimize Blackwood's culpability by suggesting he was manipulated by more sophisticated criminals. Your Honor, my client made serious errors in judgment, but he was exploited by organized criminals who targeted vulnerable public officials. The defense strategy fails because federal surveillance documented Blackwood as active participant rather than passive victim. His communications show initiative in soliciting bribes, coordinating case outcomes, and concealing criminal activity. The evidence shows Judge Blackwood initiated contact with wealthy petitioners, quoted specific prices for favorable rulings, and coordinated with court personnel to ensure case assignments that facilitated corruption. Warren responds during her rebuttal. The trial proceeds with methodical presentation of overwhelming evidence. Recorded communications, financial documentation, victim testimony, and expert analysis create a comprehensive picture of systematic judicial corruption that operated for years without detection. Patricia Whitmore testifies under immunity agreement, her testimony devastating to remaining co-conspirators. Gordon told me the payments were necessary legal fees. I didn't realize we were bribing judges until federal agents showed me the financial records. Her husband faces federal conspiracy charges that could result in 20-year sentences. Their attempt to purchase custody of Kira has destroyed their freedom, reputation, and financial security while providing federal prosecutors with evidence to dismantle entire corruption networks. Jack Morrison attempts defending his actions as zealous advocacy for legitimate clients, but federal surveillance reveals his role coordinating bribes and facilitating systematic corruption. His law license has been revoked, his assets frozen, and his professional reputation destroyed. After 6 days of trial testimony, jury deliberation takes less than 4 hours to reach unanimous guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Blackwood faces 25 years in federal prison. The Whitmores receive 15-year sentences. Morrison gets 12 years plus restitution requirements that will bankrupt him. Your criminal actions destroyed families, perverted justice, and violated the public trust in ways that damage our entire judicial system, Judge Santos states during sentencing. These sentences reflect the severity of systematic corruption that affected dozens of innocent families. The sentences provide justice for affected families while sending clear messages about federal determination to prosecute judicial corruption wherever it exists. But individual prosecutions represent only part of comprehensive reform necessary to prevent similar systematic abuse. Brin testifies before Congressional Subcommittee investigating judicial corruption, her federal agent expertise providing basis for legislative reforms designed to prevent systematic judicial bribery. Her recommendations include enhanced financial monitoring, independent case assignment systems, and mandatory reporting requirements for unusual case patterns. Honorable members of Congress, systematic judicial corruption thrives in environments with inadequate oversight and insufficient transparency, Brin explains to the subcommittee. Federal legislation requiring enhanced monitoring and reporting could prevent criminal networks from exploiting family court systems. Congressional attention ensures that Operation Clean Bench results extend beyond individual prosecutions to systematic reforms protecting vulnerable families from future corruption. Federal legislation based on Brin's recommendations receives bipartisan support for implementation across all federal jurisdictions. Dr. Martinez approaches Brin during her final day at Riverside Community Health Clinic. Agent Caldwell, I always suspected there was more to your background than clinic work suggested. Your attention to detail, organizational skills, and legal knowledge exceeded what most people in your position demonstrate. Brin smiles, finally able to acknowledge her true professional identity. 3 years undercover required careful attention to maintaining consistent behavior patterns. I learned more about healthcare administration than most federal agents ever need to know. Will you be returning to federal law enforcement? Regional assignment to the Federal Judicial Integrity Task Force, Brin confirms, investigating systematic corruption and supporting affected families as they rebuild their lives. Her new assignment allows her to continue the work begun through Operation Clean Bench while maintaining stability for Kira's education and emotional recovery. Justice served through her investigation extends to career advancement that utilizes her expertise protecting other families. Kira attends therapy sessions designed to address psychological manipulation she experienced during custody with the Whitmores. Dr. Rebecca Torres, a specialist in childhood trauma recovery, helps her process the confusion and emotional abuse imposed by people who claim to act in her best interests. Kira understands that the adults who took her were lying about her family and herself. Dr. Torres explains to Bryn, children are remarkably resilient, but systematic psychological manipulation requires professional intervention to prevent long-term damage. The therapy sessions reveal the extent of cultural erasure and identity destruction the Whitmores attempted during their brief custody. African dance classes have been replaced with forced ballet training. Natural hair was chemically straightened. Friends were declared unsuitable for her new social position. Recovery involves rebuilding Kira's sense of authentic identity while processing the trauma of systematic rejection of her cultural background. Dr. Torres continues, she needs to understand that their attempts to change her were wrong, not evidence of personal deficiency. Months of therapy gradually restore Kira's confidence and cultural pride, but the experience has matured her beyond typical 8-year-old concerns. She understands injustice in ways most children never experience, creating both vulnerability and strength that will influence her development. Mrs. Palmer visits regularly, her role in supporting Bryn during the custody battle creating lasting friendship that extends beyond the crisis that brought them together. Her wisdom about surviving institutional bias provides context for Kira's recovery and Bryn's continued federal work. Child, you did something most people never manage, Mrs. Palmer tells Bryn during one visit. You turned systematic injustice into systematic reform. That takes courage most folks don't possess. It took support from people like you who refuse to accept corruption as normal, Bryn responds. Individual courage matters, but systematic change requires community commitment to justice. Their conversation reflects broader themes about resistance to institutional bias and the collective effort required to reform systems designed to perpetuate inequality and corruption. Diana Pierce receives recognition from the State Bar Association for her role supporting federal investigation of judicial corruption. Her dedication to clients facing systematic bias has earned professional advancement and assignment to appellate court cases that will shape legal precedent for civil rights protection. Working with Agent Caldwell taught me that sometimes defending individual clients requires challenging entire systems, Pierce explains during her award acceptance speech. Public defenders have special obligations to resist systematic injustice wherever we encounter it. Pierce's career advancement represents positive outcomes for legal professionals willing to risk everything to achieve justice for clients facing systematic bias and institutional corruption. But comprehensive resolution remains incomplete. Federal investigation continues expanding to neighboring states where similar corruption networks may operate. Additional arrests seem likely as prosecutors follow financial trails and communication networks revealed through Operation Clean Bench. Bryn receives secure communications indicating related investigations in 3 other states where suspicious family court patterns suggest systematic corruption similar to what they exposed locally. Federal task force expansion could reveal nationwide networks that have operated without detection for decades. Operation Clean Bench was successful beyond our initial scope, Agent Mitchell explains during federal task force briefing. But preliminary intelligence suggests we've exposed the local component of much larger criminal enterprise. The possibility that judicial corruption extends to national networks creates both opportunity and challenge for federal prosecutors. Success in regional prosecutions provides foundation for expanded investigations that could reform judicial systems nationwide. However, resource limitations and political considerations affect federal commitment to comprehensive investigation. Some jurisdictions resist federal oversight, claiming state sovereignty over judicial administration. Political pressure from legal establishment interests could limit future investigation scope. Anonymous threats arrive at Bryn's federal office, suggesting that criminal networks exposed through her investigation retain capacity for retaliation against law enforcement personnel. Federal protective protocols remain in place, but the threats indicate ongoing criminal activity that could affect family safety. Security assessments suggest low probability of direct retaliation, Agent Cole explains during security briefing. But criminal networks with resources and connections could present ongoing risks requiring enhanced protective measures. Federal protection provides security for Bryn and Kira, but the necessity for continued vigilance indicates that dismantling criminal networks requires extended commitment beyond individual prosecutions. 1 year after Operation Clean Bench, federal task force reports indicate that judicial corruption investigations have expanded to 12 states with 37 arrests and 43 indictments pending trial. The investigation Brin initiated through her undercover work has become catalyst for nationwide reform of family court systems. Congressional legislation based on her recommendations receives final approval, creating federal oversight mechanisms and reporting requirements designed to prevent systematic judicial corruption. The Justice for Families Act establishes federal monitoring of unusual case patterns and financial irregularities that could indicate corruption. Agent Caldwell's investigation has created lasting positive change affecting family court systems nationwide, Senator Patricia Williams announces during bill signing ceremony. Her courage in exposing systematic corruption has protected thousands of families from future injustice. Legislative reform provides systematic protection that extends far beyond individual cases, creating federal oversight mechanisms that will detect and prevent corruption before it destroys families. Kira, now 9 years old, participates in community education programs where Brin speaks about recognizing and reporting institutional bias. Her presence demonstrates family resilience while providing inspiration for other children facing similar challenges. My daughter represents hope for all families affected by systematic corruption, Brin explains to community audiences. Individual recovery is possible, but systematic reform requires ongoing vigilance from citizens willing to demand justice. Their public appearances create awareness about judicial corruption while building community support for continued oversight and reform efforts. Personal testimony provides human context for legislative and judicial reforms that might otherwise seem abstract. But challenges persist. Defense attorneys in ongoing prosecutions argue that federal investigation exceeded constitutional authority, claiming that state judicial systems retain immunity from federal oversight except in extreme circumstances. Legal challenges could limit future federal authority to investigate systematic judicial corruption. Political pressure from legal establishment interests seeks to minimize federal oversight authority, arguing that isolated corruption cases don't justify expanded federal jurisdiction over state court systems. Lobbying efforts could undermine legislative reforms designed to prevent future systematic corruption. Resource limitations affect federal task force capacity to investigate all jurisdictions where suspicious patterns suggest systematic corruption. Budget constraints could force prosecutors to prioritize cases while allowing other criminal networks to operate without detection. 6 months later, encrypted email messages arrive at federal task force offices containing financial records and communication intercepts that suggest Operation Clean Bench exposed only surface-level corruption in much larger criminal enterprise spanning multiple states and involving federal judicial personnel. The messages, apparently sent by insider sources with access to criminal network communications, indicate that systematic corruption extends to federal district courts, appellate courts, and potentially Supreme Court personnel. The scope suggests criminal enterprise far beyond what federal investigators initially suspected. Intelligence assessment indicates credible information about corruption networks operating at federal judicial levels, Agent Mitchell explains during classified briefing. Source credibility remains uncertain, but the information suggests systematic corruption extending beyond state and local jurisdictions. If accurate, the intelligence indicates that Operation Clean Bench represents an initial phase of investigation that could expose corruption affecting federal judicial systems at the highest levels. However, investigating federal judges and appellate court personnel requires political authority and resources far beyond current task force capabilities. Congressional Oversight Committee receives classified briefings about potential federal judicial corruption. But political considerations affect willingness to authorize investigations that could undermine public confidence in federal court systems. The balance between justice and institutional stability creates complex political calculations. Meanwhile, Brin's daily life achieves remarkable normalcy despite ongoing security protocols. Kira attends school without federal protection, participates in African dance classes at the community center, and maintains friendships that provide stability and joy absent during the custody battle. "Mommy, do you think the bad people will try to hurt us again?" Kira asks during bedtime conversation, her innocent question reflecting awareness that justice comes with ongoing risks. "Federal agents will keep us safe," Brin responds carefully. "But more importantly, good people in our community will always help protect families from bad people who try to hurt children." The answer provides security while building Kira's understanding that protection comes from community commitment to justice rather than individual strength alone. Federal Victim Services complete family reunification efforts for 83 families affected by systematic corruption exposed through Operation Clean Bench. Children return to biological parents. Adoptions made through bribery are overturned, and custody arrangements purchased through corruption are reversed. Each family reunification represents victory over systematic injustice, but recovery requires extensive therapy, legal support, and community assistance to rebuild relationships damaged by separation imposed through corruption. Individual healing takes years, while systematic reform requires ongoing vigilance. Dr. Torres publishes research based on her work with children affected by judicial corruption, creating clinical guidelines for therapy addressing trauma imposed through systematic family separation. Her findings influence federal victim services protocols nationwide. Children affected by judicial corruption experience unique trauma patterns that require specialized intervention. Dr. Torres explains in her published research, systematic betrayal by authority figures creates complex psychological damage requiring comprehensive therapeutic approaches. Clinical research provides foundation for improved victim services while documenting the human cost of systematic corruption in terms that influence policy development and resource allocation. The anniversary of Operation Clean Bench coincides with federal task force announcement that similar investigations are planned for 27 additional jurisdictions where intelligence suggests systematic corruption affects family court systems. The investigation Brin initiated has become model for nationwide reform efforts. Operation Clean Bench demonstrates federal commitment to protecting families from systematic corruption. Attorney General Michael Rodriguez announces during press conference, "We will investigate judicial corruption wherever evidence suggests systematic violation of civil rights and constitutional protections." Federal commitment provides hope for families in other jurisdictions while creating deterrent effects that could prevent corruption from developing in courts aware of federal oversight capability. But late-night phone calls to federal task force offices continue receiving anonymous tips about corruption networks that allegedly extend far beyond cases prosecuted through Operation Clean Bench. The callers claim knowledge of systematic corruption involving federal personnel, Supreme Court cases, and international money laundering operations. Caller intelligence remains unverified, Agent Cole explains during security briefing, but the consistency and detail suggest possible insider access to criminal networks operating beyond our current investigation scope. The anonymous tips could represent attempts to mislead federal investigation or genuine intelligence from sources with access to criminal enterprise information. Verifying the intelligence requires investigation resources and political authority that may exceed current federal capacity. As Brin reviews classified intelligence reports about potential expanded corruption networks, she realizes that Operation Clean Bench may have exposed only surface elements of systematic criminal enterprise that could affect judicial systems nationwide. The investigation that began with her individual custody case has revealed corruption affecting hundreds of families across multiple states. If anonymous intelligence proves accurate, the true scope of systematic judicial corruption could affect thousands of families and require federal investigation resources far beyond current capacity. But tonight, Brin returns home to her daughter, grateful for justice achieved while understanding that systematic reform requires ongoing vigilance from citizens willing to demand accountability from institutions designed to protect rather than exploit vulnerable populations. Kira practices piano in the living room, not the forced classical training imposed by the Whitmores, but jazz and blues that reflect her cultural heritage and personal preferences. The music fills their apartment with joy that systematic corruption could never purchase or destroy. Federal investigation continues expanding. Anonymous tips arrive with increasing frequency, and intelligence suggests that Operation Clean Bench represents initial phase of much larger investigation that could reform judicial systems nationwide. But systematic change requires time, resources, and political commitment that face ongoing challenges from entrenched interests benefiting from current corruption networks. Individual victory through Brin's investigation provides hope and momentum, but comprehensive reform demands sustained effort from citizens and public officials committed to justice over institutional preservation. The lock clicks twice, once to close the door on systematic corruption exposed through Operation Clean Bench, and again to open possibilities for expanded investigation that could protect thousands of additional families from purchased injustice. Justice delayed by corruption has been restored through federal investigation, but justice achieved requires ongoing vigilance to prevent systematic abuse from returning in different forms. The work continues, one family at a time, one corrupt official at a time, one systematic reform at a time. In the gathering darkness outside their apartment window, Bryn notices unmarked vehicles with federal license plates maintaining discreet surveillance. Protection continues because criminal networks retain capacity for retaliation, but also because expanded investigation may require her expertise and testimony. Anonymous email arrives on her secure federal device. Operation Clean Bench was Phase 1. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Federal judicial corruption runs deeper than you imagined. Are you ready? The message contains encryption codes that authenticate Federal Task Force origin. The investigation that began with fighting for her daughter has become catalyst for exposing systematic corruption that could affect judicial systems nationwide. Individual courage has created opportunity for comprehensive reform, but the scope of potential corruption exceeds anything federal investigators previously imagined. Tomorrow brings new challenges, expanded investigation, and the possibility that systematic corruption extends to federal courts at the highest levels. But tonight, Bryn Caldwell sits with her daughter, listening to jazz piano, grateful for justice achieved while preparing for battles yet to come. The truth always surfaces. It just takes courage, patience, and the refusal to accept corruption as normal. Operation Clean Bench ends, but the larger work of reforming systematic injustice has only begun. The lock clicks twice. Then everything changes again.